One of my favorite tank series in War Thunder is the Pershing. I think they look great, have good guns for their BRs, and encapsulate a wide range of playstyles in a single series of tanks, even if their mobility leaves something to be desired. America already has a lot of our Pershing tanks in-game, but there are a few notable exceptions, as well as room for some interim designs that could be incorporated to flesh out ranks 3 and 4. I'm sure you know the format by now, so I'll get right into the tanks. The first tank may have been data mined as coming soon, but I'll mention it anyway. We actually have an M4 Sherman mounting the turret of a standard M26. Both tanks had the same size turret ring, so it was mechanically possible, though I can't imagine it would do wonders for the power-to-weight ratio or gun handling of the poor thing. The reference image appears to use the chassis of an M4A2 or M4A3. So beyond that, it would likely handle similarly to a slower, more unwieldy Sherman tank. There's not much else to say on it. I think it would be fine at 5.7 or 6.0, trading the Sherman's superior handling for a heavier gun and turret, while retaining its lackluster hull armor. Moving on, we'll go through the prototypes of what would become the Pershing. The first pilot, the T20, is already in the game. I'll stop off quickly to advocate that the T20 receive an APCR round to deal with the heavy armor it routinely faces, and frankly it should be moved down to 5.3, at least if not 5.0. With that out of the way, the next two vehicles in the series are the T22 and T22E1, which outwardly appear similar to existing tanks, but have some unique changes under the hood. The T22 is similar to the T20, but changes out its transmission for the M4A3s, which would give it superior acceleration, but bad reverse speeds. The T22E1, on the other hand, retains the same features as its predecessor, but uses a prototype 75mm M3 autoloader and smaller two-man turret. This would be a unique vehicle for the US tree that rewards smart play and opportunistic players. Both would have stabilized turrets. The T22 would be fine at 5.3 to complement the M4A2, and the T22E1 would be fine at 5.0, having subpar penetration and armor, but allowing players to take advantage of its autoloader. Following the T22 is the much more widely produced T23. We again have two models here, the base T23 and final model T23E4. The base T23 uses a similar chassis to previous tanks, but its turret is the well-designed M476 style, sporting the later mantlet designs of the Sherman tank. It has the simpler suspension of early Shermans, but goes back to an electrical transmission for better maneuverability. Over 250 were produced. A later model, the T23E4, adopts the versatile HVSS suspension and wider tracks for superior maneuverability, and of course, adopts the all-important muzzle brake on its 76mm gun. Again, owing to their turrets, they would also both be stabilized. The T22 would serve well at 5.3, and T22E4 at 5.7, giving their Sherman cousins some well-deserved backup. Moving back into familiar territory, we come to the T25 series. Now this tank is a bit of a disaster in terms of its implementation. It uses the chassis of one variant and the turret of another. To best understand it, we should quickly go over the history of the T25. In 1943, the Army decided that a 76mm gun was too small for a heavy tank, finding that while the 76mm guns of M4 Shermans could penetrate German heavy tanks, they were unable to do so at a distance. Thus, an order was put out to modernize the American 90mm M1A1 anti-aircraft gun for tank usage. The T-23 with its HVSS suspension was selected as a promising starting point. Tanks armed with this modified aircraft gun, designated T-7, were designated heavy tank T-25. The initial T-25 tanks were too heavy for their transmissions, and it was found that the original turret was too small, so an improved variant was ordered. This original tank was mistakenly designated as T-25E1 by observing Soviet officers, which may be the source of the confusion in the game. The actual T-25E1 used a different suspension and turret design to correct the flaws of the original, but because of its manufacturer, used torsion bar suspension instead of the preferred HVSS. This tank used a cast hull in contrast to the welded hulls of all preceding tanks. It had improved tracks, the improved 90mm M3 gun, and some other minor design changes. In summary, the T25 in-game uses the chassis of the real-life T25 and turret of the real-life T25E1. I don't particularly care how it's done, but the in-game model should choose one, and the other should be added with it in a folder. Both should go at 6.0, since their armor isn't great and they have no stabilizer. The reported attempts to fit it with a long 105mm gun never made it past the drawing board and have no basis for adding. Finally escaping from the T25, the remaining Pershing model yet to be added is the T26E2, also known as the M45 post-war. This was an infantry support Pershing armed with a 105mm close support gun. This gun had access to both HE and heat rounds, which can penetrate up to 100mm of armor. This would be the most difficult to add, with its gun being far below average yet possessing armor on par with a Tiger I. I think the best place might be 5.7, where most tanks can still penetrate it, yet it will have trouble penetrating most heavy tanks it encounters. Finally, America could also receive the M26A1, a tech tree backup for the Pershing at 6.3, which already exists for other nations in the game. These are most of the remaining Pershing variants in-game. There are other minor changes to the T20 to T25 series, but they're too small to be worth mentioning. I think almost all of these could be safely added without disrupting the meta, and would give America some much-needed backups for the Shermans, a choice between speed and gun handling versus maneuverability and firepower. Hopefully we can see some or all of these added one day. Until then, stay tuned for more War Thunder content. Like and subscribe to see future videos.